Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo.
Amateur Traveler, episode 587. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about festivals and a funicular, whales, buskers, and lighthouses, and the most photographed hotel in the world as we go to the province of Quebec. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. We'll hear more from our sponsor later on in the episode, but first let's talk about Quebec. I'd like to welcome to the show a friend and fellow travel blogger and lifestyle blogger as well, Margarita Ibbott from downshiftingpro.com, who's come to talk to us about the province of Quebec. Margarita, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What a pleasure to be here.
I feel like I can count you as a friend as we have traveled together now in Alabama, of all places. But we're going to talk about Quebec today. We're probably going to talk, knowing Margarita, we're going to talk about a lot of things today. But why are we talking about Quebec? What is your connection to Quebec?
I am a huge fan of Quebec, and full disclosure, it is my hometown. Although I'm originally from Colombia.
When you say it, you don't mean the city of Quebec City, you mean...
No, Quebec City, no. We're actually kind of talk about I'm from Montreal originally. Mm-hmm. And then the thing is that I grew up in Montreal, and I left Montreal after I finished university at McGill. And then I've lived in other places in Canada, and I find myself coming back. I absolutely love Quebec, and it's Montreal and Quebec City, and also I've discovered Quebec Maritime, and I have right now in my sights going to the Saguenay and Charlevoix, which are all different regions within the province of Quebec. And one of the main reasons we are going to talk about it is actually Canada and Quebec City and Montreal have had really big celebrations this year. So Canada celebrated 150 years of Confederation this year, and we've had great celebrations. And Montreal celebrated 375 years of being a city that's been founded. And then Quebec City will celebrate 410 years. So it's one of the oldest cities in Canada. There's just so much to do, and it's absolutely looking fantastic these days. It's a change from when I left it in the late 80s. But it's really beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I just think you should go. It's so close. I think it's like an hour and a half flight from New York City. Very doable. Lots of airlines come in. You have American, Delta, United. If you're in the States, not a problem. Any of the big airlines are going to fly into Montreal. And it's usually through Montreal that you're going to connect into Quebec City, although there are definitely direct flights.
And I want to interject here and say, when we talk about this year, for those of you listening in the far future, this is 2017 when we're recording this, which is the big anniversary year. And then also, you talked about how it has changed. Before we started recording, you started telling me quite a lot of history, which I cut you off from so that we could record it, about how Montreal has changed from when you lived there.
It's kind of interesting to understand the context of political history in Quebec to understand how it's evolved and why it is predominantly a French-speaking province. So it is the largest province in Canada, but I would say 85% of the population is French as a first language. The most bilingual city that you're going to get is Montreal. you will find it very easy to access English services, restaurants, hotels, also in Quebec City and many of the tourist areas. But once you hit rural Quebec, it is really predominantly French speaking. So when I left, I arrived in Montreal in 1969, and in 1976, we had change of government, and it was all due in part because of the Quiet Revolution, which was a time when Quebecers decidedly wanted to self-govern because they
Hmm.
were a French majority. And so the change of government brought in a separatist government. And what they decided to do was to change all of the language laws. And that's one of the things that's kind of important to understand. So the language laws pretty much, we do consider ourselves a bilingual country, but predominantly it was English. So now you have a switch from English to just having signs in French. So there was no English whatsoever. And they also made the requirements that all of the employees had to speak French fluently, all of the text had to be in French. So Montreal was actually the largest city in Canada.
Which I did not know until you were telling me that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it was actually the hub of all financial industries in Canada. It was also manufacturing. Lots of headquarters were in Montreal. And then with that change of government and the decision to change the language laws, you had a huge exodus. I'm going to take a rough estimate, but it was at least 2 million and probably close to 4 million people who left Montreal and went to Toronto or went to Calgary, but for the most part, most of them went to Toronto. So all of those head offices also left. So there was a period in time there that it was really difficult for Montreal because their whole economy was really affected. But I tell you, that doesn't happen anymore. I was so excited to go back this spring. So I was there in the spring of 2017 to see the celebration specifically for Montreal 375. And I was with my husband. Now, my husband's from Vancouver, he's from the West Coast. So although we've been to Montreal lots of times, it was really, really nice to be immersed in old Montreal and just walked around the city. And they have done a fantastic job. I said to my husband, this is the Montreal that I remember. This is very vibrant, lots going on. The best things about Montreal for me are the festivals. They have amazing festivals. So world renowned jazz festival, it's in its like 42nd year or something like that.
Hmm.
It's been around for a really long time. There's not a comedian that you know that hasn't played the Montreal Just for Laughs festival. It's a huge comedy festival also held in Montreal. And one of the funnest festivals that they have is Osheaga, which is a music festival. And it's on my bucket list. I really want to go next year with my two daughters. So those are kind of the summer festivals that you have. They also have a really great circus festival too that I didn't really know about. It was brought to my attention by actually a journalist from California and she's gone to it twice. So I'm
Hmm.
trying to see if I can squeeze that in. But yeah, so Montreal it's a very interesting city. And I'm telling you right now, don't be intimidated by the fact that most people are speaking French. You'll find it absolutely charming, and you'll always be able to have somebody help you out in English. So
Okay.
nothing to worry about in that sense.
I did want to say we have done a show, for those of you who've been listening for a long time, on both Montreal and Quebec City before. It was episode 300, but it's just been a while. It's been 6 years since we did it, so it seems like it was time to do this again and to do this with somebody from a different perspective, somebody who has a little more roots there. So we've already established the why you'd want to go. Let's talk about what kind of itinerary you would recommend.
Quebec is all of Canada. We live our lives either in the winter or in the summer. There's lots of things to do during the winter also.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we can talk about that more for Quebec City because they have Quebec Carnival. But in the summer, a really great itinerary is my biggest suggestion is to stay right downtown or in Old Montreal.
Okay. So we're starting in
Because
Montreal, first of
we're
all.
starting in Montreal,
Okay.
right? So my favorite little boutique hotel was St. Paul, Hotel St. Paul, and it was right at the entrance of Old Montreal. And the reason I like that was one, it's super close to the train station. You can also take the train from New York City or any part in the US. And it's very, very walkable in Old Montreal. So I would actually spend some time in Old Montreal. They've spent money on this extremely cool thing. I got to tell you about it because it's an app And what it does is you're going to take a walk in Old Montreal in the evening at dusk because it's called Cité Mémoire. What it does is with your app, it's going to turn on projectors and project images on different buildings in Old Montreal.
The projectors are on the buildings, and they're just waiting for us to walk by with the app.
With the app and turn
Oh,
it
that
on.
is the coolest thing I've ever heard.
It is so cool. I have to tell you, it's a lot of fun because when we were there in May, all of a sudden these small little short films would start, and you're looking around and you don't hear anything because you're hearing it on your app. So
Huh.
you see the visual, but it's when you're holding it on your phone, right, or your tablet, you can hear the audio, and it's all historical. Everything from talking about Rocket Richard, hockey legend from the Montreal Canadiens,
Mhm.
all the way to history, to shipping magnates, to when people immigrated and from where, right? They have a really huge Irish contingency that came in into Montreal. So that is a really, really good thing to do. It's absolutely free. You just got to download it, and then you can follow a map and go to different ones. But that's a really interesting thing to do.
After dark, when we're going to be able to see.
After dark,
Okay.
yes, after dark, yeah.
Let's take a break here and hear from our sponsor. This week's episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by Fragrance X. Fragrance X is America's largest fragrance outlet. They offer free shipping and up to 80% off brand name perfumes, which is a way better deal than you're going to get in the duty-free shop. And then you also don't have to go on the plane smelling like perfume. They also help you find discontinued perfumes, and I've had that problem at Christmas and Valentine's Day. For my wife, who was trying to track down a specific Halston fragrance, and for my mother, I can't even remember what it was that I went all over town looking for. So Fragrance X, you can also get 20% off using the code TRAVELER20 at fragrancex.com. Thanks again to Fragrance X for sponsoring this episode.
The other thing that you want to do for sure is everybody wants to know where Celine Dion got married. Don't they, Chris?
Don't
they?
count me in that group, but okay.
Okay. Well, the reason that you actually want to do that is because Notre Dame Cathedral is one of the oldest and most beautiful Baroque cathedrals you will ever see in your life.
Mhm.
It is spectacular. But you know what? For the $375, they brought it up a notch. So now they have a multimedia audio visual presentation that you can watch. It's called Aura. It was brought to life by, it's called Moment Factory. And Moment Factory is a huge multimedia international firm, actually. One of their biggest installations that they ever did was at the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona.
In Barcelona, yeah.
In Barcelona, yeah. So it's really exciting because it's very modern, and yet they light up the church like nothing you've ever seen before. And it just makes it's beautiful.
And people are still going to be able to see that in 2018 and beyond? They're going to be leaving in place? Okay.
Yes. I'm pretty sure that they invested something like $4 or $5 million into this. So the city of Montreal definitely has to get its money back. And it will, because that's the thing with the city of Montreal. We're very big on spending a lot of money and then ending up having to pay for it by taxpayers for years and years, which is what happens
With the expo, yeah.
with the Olympic Stadium.
Oh, the Olympic
right?
Stadium. Okay, yeah.
The Olympic Stadium. So, okay. So we're in Old Montreal, and you're going to see Notre Dame Cathedral. You're going to go down to Place de la Callière, and that is a museum. It's an archaeological museum, but it's really nice because it really talks about when New France was established, right? And then you have all the waterfront down there. Really great. You can pretty much walk into any little restaurant in there, and you're going to have a great experience. You're going to feel like you're in old world Europe right there. Okay. So that's good. We're going to come back. We're going to circle around, and we're going to come back to the Olympic Stadium.
Okay.
And the reason that I like that area is because they've really developed it as sort of an entertainment area for families much more. You can visit, you can go to the top of the tower and see a fantastic view of Montreal. So it's a different view because it's from the eastern part of Montreal. But they also have, for example, the planetarium there. They have the Biodome there, which is, they have animals and insects and stuff like that kids will just absolutely love. And so they have a couple of different museums that you can go to. So if you're a soccer fan, also, Saputo Stadium is right there, and you can watch the Impact. So my husband is a great guy and loves traveling, and the only and I was like, we can go to this museum and we can go to that museum. And he just said, I said, is there anything we want to do? And he said to me, I really want to go see the Montreal Impact. So we went, we scalped tickets, and we had a fantastic time. So that's another really fun thing that you can do. Now, a big tip, big tip for everyone is I love Passport Montreal.
Okay.
So it is a city pass.
Okay.
And the reason I'm mentioning it is because there's public transportation included in this. So that's genius. You get to go to different sites, and you can actually, I wrote a blog post specifically talking about that you can go in specific areas. So you can do downtown and walk around and, hit the wax museum and hit the different things. Or you can go to, for example, there's 2 or 3 different venues that you can visit with Passport Montreal, and they're right there. They're all in the Olympic Stadium area. Okay, so that's a really good value for your money for sure.
What are the 2 or 3 that we can visit by the stadium?
You can actually go into the Olympic Stadium and go into the tower. So that's one of the things. The planetarium is another
the 2
one.
you mentioned, okay.
Yeah, and then the other one is the Biodome. You know what? It's on the blog.
Okay.
I have the whole list.
Okay, well, and we'll link to that in the show notes. Cool. What else are we seeing in Montreal? Now, we haven't actually gone to Montreal yet. Should we?
Yeah, so you can see a viewpoint of Montreal from the top of the Olympic Stadium.
Yep.
Also included in the passport is you can go to PVM, which is Place Ville-Marie, which is one of the tallest buildings. And the beauty I love about that is it's a 360 view, and you get to see the water. You get to see Montreal is an island.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the suburbs are off of the island, so you're going to see the South Shore. You can see the West Island, which is still part of Montreal, though. And then you can see Montreal. So Montreal is, in Montreal, you have 3 peaks. They're hills. They're not really mountains. You can do bunny trails skiing on them, but for the most part, they're just, yes, you can. That's where I learned how to ski originally when I was a little kid.
I had no idea. Okay.
When I was 5, yeah. So you go to Montreal. In Montreal, there's lots of different scenic views that you can just stop and just take in the whole city. And that really gives you a better idea of the downtown area. Mm-hmm. It's a whole park. It's not just a mountain there's picnic areas, tons of people. Montreal is a heavy immigrant-based city. There are people from all over the world from Montreal, all over the world. And a lot of times when you are in an urban city, like you would in Central Park, right, or Hyde Park in London, like you find that a lot of families go to Montreal, to Montreal, and spend a day picnicking.
Okay.
There's lots of fun things to do there. So definitely you want to actually go into Montreal.
Well, you're paused here for a second. You had mentioned that it was on the water. We didn't mention what water it was on.
It is on St. Lawrence. So that is one of the main reasons why this itinerary is so beautiful, is that you start in Montreal, and then you're going to go on the north shore of Montreal, and you're going to drive to Quebec City on the north shore. So you're going to see a whole different, you're going to go by Laurentians and Lanaudière in that sort of region. And then that's cheese, wine, farm to table, fantastic places to stop. Very, very relaxing. So it is part of the St. Lawrence Seaway. The St. Lawrence is 2,000 kilometers.
Probably.
It is basically the seaway that established Canada, because you enter in from the Atlantic. So you're going to enter in through the north part of the St. Lawrence Seaway. You're going to come down, and then you eventually get into the Great Lakes. Eventually, you're going to end up in Lake Ontario, and you go through a bunch of locks, and you end up in Lake Erie, and then Lake Michigan, and Lake Superior. So that is how you enter the Great Lakes, is through St. Lawrence Seaway.
Okay. And now you started to get us out of town here, but I think I got you off on a tangent. Are there other things you want to see in Montreal before we continue on towards Quebec City?
For me, the main thing is Old Montreal is just so amazing. But if you want to kind of do a little shopping, do a little partying, have a good meal, you want to hit downtown area. So the
Okay.
downtown area is great. The bars in Montreal are open till 3 o'clock in the morning. When I was younger, don't know now, but I wouldn't be surprised me at all, right? We didn't actually start going out to the bar until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. It is a very nocturnal city. It's a very safe city. That's a really important thing for you to know. You can go to St. Catharines. You can go to and walk and go shopping and do some of the best shopping that you've ever, and you'll find just about anything that you want, you're going to find. My favorite retailer is called Simon's, and Simon's was established in Quebec City, and it's one of the best retailers in Canada as far as I'm concerned. I absolutely love them. But
And you mentioned good restaurants downtown. What would you recommend?
you want to do kind of something fun, you can go to Joe Beef.
Joe Beef. Okay.
Yeah, so the two owners of Joe Beef are best buddy with Anthony Bourdain. If you've ever watched his show, he loves hanging out with these two French Canadian chefs, and it's just amazing. So really, really fun. If you want to do something traditionally Montreal, you're going to go to Schwartz. You're going to go up Saint Laurent, and you can do one of two things. You're going to stand in line, and then you're going to sit down at a deli, and you may be sharing a table, but you're going to have the best smoked meat in Montreal.
Okay.
So another big tip is if you don't want to stand in line, you just go to the takeout and you're going to order a poutine with smoked meat. So for those who have not been initiated to the, which is the Quebec national dish, poutine is French fries, and then they put cheese curds on top, and then they put a gravy on top of that. So it gets all soaked up, and it's just a ooey gooey mess of deliciousness. There's nothing like it. And then just to add a little bit to it, Montrealer, you go to Schwartz's and they put smoked meat on it, and it's fantastic. So that's a really typical Montrealer thing to do. You can also, a lot of people do is they have a ongoing battle between bagels. So you're either going to go to St. Viateur Bagel, or you're going to go to Fairmont Bagel. Those bagel shops are open 24 hours a day. You will find a lineup usually once the bars close because people go and get bagels. They're different from typical, when we see other bagels everywhere else in the world, they're very big and doughy and bready, and that is not what you're going to get. You're going to get something that's thin, it's boiled, it's always baked in a wood oven, and they are absolutely delicious. When I go to Montreal and I'm driving, I come back, not a word of a lie, Chris, 6-7 dozen bagels. For the 7.5, 8 hours that it takes me to drive home from Montreal to London, Ontario, all you do is smell bagels, but they are fantastic. So it's another one of those really silly things, but if you want something really authentic, that's what you're going to do. You're going to have bagels. You're going to have bagels for breakfast, and they're awesome.
Cool. We've talked about things to see, and we talked about things to eat. Are there things that you should do in Montreal? Activities?
For me, the doing is the festival.
Okay.
I'm a really, 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 really big fan of the Montreal Jazz Festival. I came to really appreciate and learn all about jazz when I was there. And I think it's a must do. I think once in your life, you need to go to the Montreal Jazz Festival. It is huge. When I was there the last time and Diana Krall was on stage and her husband was with her, I'm going to tell you, it was 70, 80,000 people in that square. It was absolutely insane. It's just a lot of fun. There's just no other words for it. It's a lot of fun. The festivals are really great. Montreal is very walkable, but it also has fantastic metro system. Actually, when I was in Washington, D.C., I thought it was very similar. I thought the metro was very similar in how it is. So it's not that grinding subway sound that you get in Toronto and in New York City.
Sure.
Because it's all on wheels. It's much quieter, but it's really, really nice. It's a really nice thing. That's what I would say is the best thing, because any day trip that you can have a day trip where you're going to go up to the Laurentians and go to Tremblant, or you can go to the Eastern Townships. If you're here for the winter, you can go to the Eastern Townships and have some of the most amazing skiing that you're going to have. It butts up right against Vermont. So a lot of people also go into Vermont and go to Stowe.
Okay.
So that's definitely what you want to do. So we're going to leave Montreal.
Okay.
It's been fun. We've had a great time. We've eaten well. We had a lot of good laughs. But now we're just going to go into what is the UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is Old Quebec City.
Well, and before we get to Quebec City, you stopped us along the way at some farm to table things, but you didn't say where we were stopping.
I would probably say one of the places that you want to go to really is you can go into Tremblant.
Okay.
Tremblant is just anything really in the Laurentians there. You can stop off along the highways and it's got some of the best antiquing you've ever been to.
Okay.
I actually purchased a couple of pieces that I had shipped here to London. They're pretty used to it. They will ship just about anywhere. I was a little bit surprised, but they will. So I kind of want to get to Quebec City because we have like a lot to cover. So in 2018, Quebec City will be celebrating 410 years. One of the other iconic thing that they're going to celebrate is 125 years for the Chateau Frontenac has been open. So if you look at any picture in Quebec City, the picture you're probably looking at is Chateau Frontenac. Right. It is the most photographed hotel in the world. And I believe it because you can't take a bad picture of Chateau Frontenac. If you're lucky enough to stay, rock on. It's not for the faint of heart. It is definitely a luxury hotel, but that shouldn't stop you from having drinks or having high tea or enjoying a meal and just enjoying the view. Because when you hit Quebec City, once again, very modern city, that is the capital of the province of Quebec. That is where the legislature sits. It has a beautiful legislature. Quebec City is much smaller. It's in the 450, 480,000 people. It is primarily really a government town for the most part. And then the other thing is it's all about tourism. As a World UNESCO site, it's a fortified city where you will find a citadel. Visiting the citadel is really, really fun. If you go in the summer, you need to watch the changing of the guards because they're in full red serge and they're wearing these huge beaver hats. They're like the tall ones that are, I'm going to say like 24 inches high. And they have this honorary goat that they love who is there. And we thought that was the funniest thing that the journalists from California, we thought that was the most amusing thing in the whole world. But that's a really fun thing to do. So like I said, Chateau Frontenac would be ideal if you could stay there. That's great. But it also has other really reasonable chain hotels. The Delta, fantastic view. The Hilton, fantastic view. So lots of different places to stay. You can also have Airbnbs. You can rent condos, lots of different places. So once you get into Quebec City, you just really want to get in and you actually just want to park your car and you want to walk around. Extremely safe city. And there's so much to see in it, in that you literally feel like you've walked into an old European town. It's got that kind of vibe to it. It's very picturesque, lots of cobblestone roads. So please, ladies, wear sensible shoes. Lots of walking, and there are hills. There's also museums in there. And it's a lot of fun. The reason that I was there with my husband in 2016 was they have one of the largest music festival called the Festival d'été, the summer festival. And it runs for 10 days. And Chris, it is the best kept secret as far as festivals are concerned. You can get a general admission ticket for $120 Canadian. So what is that, like 50 cents American? No, just kidding. I'm going to say it's probably about $85 American, but it's for the full 10 days. We saw the Lumineers, City in Color, Red Hot Chili Peppers. There was Selena Gomez. Sheryl Crow played that year. I mean, it's a fantastic music festival, and so few people know about it. If you're not like a true aficionado or you're not from Quebec, they also have a ton of French Canadian acts and French Canadian artists. They're very proud about promoting them. You're going to see some amazing music, but try to plan your stay. If you can be there at the beginning of July, usually like 5 to 15, 6 to 16, somewhere in there in July for the Festival d'été, do it. Best kept secret. Last year they had Kendrick Lamar, and The most they've ever had was when the Rolling Stones played there about 5 years ago, and they had over 100,000 people attend that concert. We're going to get back to history again, and the Plains of Abraham really were the British met the French, and it is where Upper Canada and Lower Canada ended up being all together because the French were defeated on the Plains of Abraham, and that's why we have Canada as a united Anglophone, Francophone country, is because of that battle at the Plains of Abraham.
Well, I think it's also where the Americans were defeated when they invaded, and therefore we have two countries, not one, in
Absolutely.
the northern part of North America.
Exactly. Yeah, that is exactly where that happened. So it's a beautiful place also. You can walk around. They have lots of festivals. You can bike, rollerblade, walk, just absolutely gorgeous. So it's a really beautiful place to be visiting there. So right now we're looking at historic Quebec City. Grab a cup of coffee, have a croissant, take it in. Remember, eating in Quebec, the province, is an art form. It's done slowly. Okay. It's done slowly. It's done over a long period of time. People really take their time in
More in
eating
a
and
European
enjoying
style than a American style is really what we're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So if you really want to enjoy having an appetizer and dinner and just take your time, you're going to love it. You're just going to love it. So then as we walk down the Chateau Frontenac, you can actually take, during the summer, a funicular. I don't know, how do you say that in English? Like
that works for me, funicular.
It's like a little tram.
Yeah, inclined railway.
Right? And then you're going to go down and walk around in the streets sort of in the lower part, and you'll actually have a better view of the St. Lawrence Seaway at that point in time. And there's beautiful shops, little antique shops. There's great shopping. It's like one of those, you just walk around and you just take it all in and you enjoy it. I mean, there's lots of things to do. When you're on the Chateau Frontenac, you're looking out over the St. Lawrence Seaway, you'll be walking on the Dufferin Terrace. Now, Dufferin Terrace is this huge wooden boardwalk that sits in front of the Chateau Frontenac. During the summers, there's buskers. There's different things that you're going to see there.
Buskers, street musicians for some people who don't use that term in the U.S.
Oh, is that a Canadian term? Buskers? Really?
It tends to be used more in other English-speaking countries other than the U.S.
Oh, so I'm sorry, Chris,
street musicians.
Street musicians.
Well, anybody who's traveled far and wide has run across the term, but it's just one of the things I want to make sure our U.S. listeners don't always use that term. So
within there, you also find the Palais Royal. So it's a museum that is specifically about, once again, when Quebec was established, the settlement of Quebec. And so very interesting museum. So Quebec City is really a place where you go to find more about culture, about history. And it has one of the most beautiful, beautiful museums I've ever been to. The National Museum, Arts Museum, so the Musée national des Beaux-Arts du Québec.
Oh, Beaux-Arts.
Yes, Beaux-Arts, right? So they just opened up a brand new pavilion last year. And oh my God, I'm a museum girl. Not a museum I have met. Like, I've never met a museum I haven't liked. And really, that part of the museum is brand new. It's modern. It's off of the Plains of Abraham. So you can actually leave the museum and then walk onto the Plains of Abraham right from the museum. And it's got 4 or 5 different pavilions. But the newest one was just opened up a year ago in May. And it has one of the most beautiful Inuit art permanent collections that I've ever seen. So if you want something interesting, unusual to see, that Inuit art, Native Canadian art, absolutely a beautiful museum to go. It's a must on my list. It's a must do. If you're going to go to one museum, go there. It's just absolutely amazing.
Now, and Beaux-Arts, just a fine art museum would be the translation there.
Yeah, right.
You have mentioned before that your husband is less a museum person. So what is his favorite thing to do in Quebec?
He's like a road trip sort of guy. Okay. So one of the things that I would suggest you do is get into the car and you're going to start driving once again on the North Shore. You're going to go to Montreal Falls, which I was told was actually higher in height in Niagara. I can't really picture that because it's much smaller, but it's pretty amazing. And that's not far away. It's about a 40-minute drive from downtown
Okay.
Quebec City. And hiking, going for a good hike there. It's absolutely beautiful. And then we kept sort of driving, and then we went to Bay St. Catherine. And Bay St. Catherine.
So now we're heading up to not to the Maritimes, but to Quebec Maritime.
Quebec region. We're going into Quebec region, and we're starting to get into Quebec Maritime. So
Okay.
this cruise that you take, so I really suggest that you take it. One, it's going to be about 2 hours, so an hour and a half, about 2 hours away from Quebec City. But the beauty about this is that you go whale watching.
Okay. And the cruise is starting in Quebec City, or we're driving 2 hours and then we're getting on a boat?
No, you have to drive up to there.
There is a little vague. Where is there?
Bay St. Catherine
Bay
is
St.
where
Catherine.
it would start. Like I said, it's called Croisière AML. And why I like where that one starts in particular is it takes you in and you start going into the seaway.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, you're going to see a lot, really, really, really lucky. You're going to see a beluga whale and
Minke whales? Yep.
I might be saying that wrong.
No, minke whales we saw in New Brunswick. Minke and finback.
And finback, exactly. And so
Finback, the second largest whale in the world.
we did not see a finback, though.
Okay.
We did not see really, really big whales. We saw smaller whales,
Mm-hmm.
but you're going to pass by Le Prince. Le Prince is one of the most cool lighthouses you've ever seen in your entire life because it's kind of in the middle of the St. Lawrence. So it looks like a huge pylon, right, in the middle of the St. Lawrence. It used to be a working lighthouse, but it's absolutely beautiful. And that can start off, if you want to do something completely different and super fun, go to Quebec Maritime and do the Lighthouse Trail.
Okay.
That's a really fun thing to do. But within this cruise, you're going to pass by Le Prince, and you're going to see this beautiful, iconic lighthouse. And then you're going to swing over, and you're going to see the Saguenay Fjords. And then you're going to stop at a place called Tadoussac. Now, Tadoussac is really important because it's got this iconic hotel that I stayed on that was so fun, like old school hotel. But what the interesting point is for Americans is Tadoussac and that area in specific used to be very much of a recreational area for people from New York State.
Huh.
So in that Gilded Age, but also a bit, into the 20s and 30s and 40s,
Mm-hmm.
all of these Americans from New England would come up to hunting lodges in that specific area.
Got it.
So you will find amazing places to stay within that. But the Tadoussac has been around for years, and it was a very kind of ritzy, old school lodge with a huge lawn in front of it, and just really fun. They have a tiny little museum on wildlife and beluga whales, and it's really adorable, great for the kids. Really enjoy that. But it also gives you a beautiful view of looking up the Saguenay River and all the fjords there. So you can do all sorts of things in the Saguenay, but just for our purposes right now, you're just going to go on that boat tour.
Okay.
And you're going to see a part of the St. Lawrence River as you're entering it from the Atlantic. So really beautiful.
And I'll put a link in the show notes also to the Lighthouse Trail that you mentioned.
Yeah, Quebec Maritime is absolutely beautiful. If you've gone to New Brunswick, there's a lot of similarities in part. So if you look at the province of Quebec, it's got a very large piece above, and then it has what looks like a thumb. So if you think of it like a mitten, there's a thumb part, and that's called Gaspé.
Okay.
And that region is all Côte Nord, Quebec Maritime. It opens into the Magdalen Islands. So it's not rustic. It's just nature. It's beautiful. It's beautiful tree. One of the reasons that the Canadian flag has a maple leaf in it is because there are so many maples, specifically in Quebec. Not even in the rest of Canada. Quebec has a huge amount of maples. maple syrup, right?
Sure.
So Quebec is the largest producer of maple syrup in the world. They produce 80% of the maple syrup in the world. You can find some great desserts, candies, syrup, anything you want with maple syrup, you can get it in Quebec. But they actually they consume something like 10 or 20%. So that just gives you an idea of how important maple production and trees are in Quebec. Super, super important. And in Canada, super important.
If we're doing a road trip, we can bring back maple syrup to put on those bagels, apparently.
Oh, no, that's just sacrilege. What are you talking about? No. You're going to have maple candies.
Okay.
So that's a kind of a really nice trip to come along. And then what you can do is you can take the ferry across. You can do that and then take the ferry back to Bay St. Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gosh, you know what? This is what I forgot to tell you. You're absolutely right. I forgot to tell you about when you're driving up. Bay St. Paul is a little area. It's a little city when you're driving up to Quebec City. That's like a quaint little French town there. That's where you want to stop off. Remember, we're talking about where do you want to stop off? Besides the Laurentian, Bay St. Paul.
Okay.
So it's sort of halfway between Montreal and Quebec City. Absolutely quaint. They have a fantastic, really sexy, modern hotel in Bay St. Paul, and it's a great little romantic getaway. Just saying.
Cool. Well, this one is getting to be a little long. Anything else you wanted to add to this itinerary before we get to some of my wrap-up questions?
What you're going to do is, so you've gone from Montreal to Quebec City on the north shore,
Yep.
and you're going to come back on the south shore.
Okay.
So the south shore has sort of a different vibe to it altogether, and that's when you're getting into the eastern townships in there. It's just, once again, just a beautiful scenic drive, and that's what you're looking at. There's nothing really in the sense of that you want to stop and you're going to look at history or you're going to look at, no, it's just completely scenic at that point in time. So in Quebec City, the other thing that you might want to do during the winter is the Carnival.
Right.
So that's a winter carnival that they have, and it's sort of at the end of January, the beginning of February, and they absolutely embrace the cold. You'll find yourself doing slides. There's also ice canoeing. There's also the ice hotel. I'm super excited. I'm going to go, Chris.
Wait. Ice hotel, I know.
Ice hotel, yeah.
Back up a little bit. Ice canoeing. Yep. Canoes made of ice?
No, they go because they break up the water, right?
Yeah. You're canoeing in the ice.
Canoeing in the ice in big portage canoes. Big Voyager canoes.
So these are 15-person canoes.
Exactly. And then they have canoe races. So I've never seen this.
Okay.
See, I'm going to go actually in January, at the end of January with my husband for Carnival. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. It's not a participatory thing for me. I'm just going to watch. I'm not going to get into a water canoe. But you can also go like ice fishing, skating, snowshoeing. Yeah, tons. Any possible. There's dog sledding. You can do that also. There's a lot of things that you can do in the Quebec City region that you'll really, really appreciate. So I think the main thing that I want people to understand is give yourself some time.
Yep.
Give yourself a week, 10 days. You can do both cities. There's a lot to take in. There's family stuff that you can do. There's romantic getaways. For me and my husband, we went to Montreal for a romantic weekend and it was awesome. It was just, the food was great. The atmosphere was great. Very safe cities. Lots of cultures, lots of museums to see. And it's a completely different vibe that you will not get in the rest of North America. You just won't because of the culture.
And one thing I would say in terms of a cost-saving measure for Canada, if you're thinking about doing this trip from the U.S. or from elsewhere, you might consider looking at the alternatives or for not flying in Montreal, but flying into, say, Burlington, Vermont, and driving up. Just because sometimes the flights, I used to work with somebody, for instance, who lived in Ottawa, who would drive down to the U.S. and then fly to Boston because the flights out of Canada can be quite expensive sometimes. So just look at those alternatives when you're booking the trip to make your decision. Because Montreal is very close to Vermont.
Absolutely. When you're looking at Burlington, Vermont, you're looking at about, I'm going to say maybe an hour and a half at the very most.
I've only been to Montreal. I haven't been to Quebec City. It was supposed to be part of our trip this summer, and then we realized that we were doing too much and cut it down to PEI in New Brunswick and Maine. but I've driven to Montreal for dinner when we were in upstate Vermont one time. So it is certainly something you can do. As we go to wrap this up, you're standing at the prettiest spot in this region of Quebec that we've talked about. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
Even though I'm a Montrealer, I have to say I'm standing on the Dufferin Terrace
Okay.
at the base of the Chateau Frontenac
Okay.
because the view north up the St. Lawrence River is just spectacular. It's
Okay.
spectacular. It's breathtaking. Yeah.
One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Quebec.
Oh my God, there's so many things. You can't turn right on a light in Montreal.
Okay. But you have a fairly easy sense of humor, I'd say.
Yeah, no, do you know what? I think poutine.
Poutine, yeah. Well, poutine is just the strangest thing. But
It is a very, very strange thing. So only in Montreal. You know what makes you laugh? Honestly, I would have to say it has to be like just for laughs. Like I have to go back to festivals.
okay.
You are not going to see another festival like that, or even the Circus Festival. You will not see that anywhere else, just in Montreal.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize Quebec in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Can I use 4?
Well, you're going to owe me a word.
Okay. Love of my life.
Okay. Excellent.
Doesn't matter if I've lived there for 25 years or I'm returning year after year. I find something new, something interesting, something je ne sais quoi, in Montreal or Quebec City. The culture is outstanding. The food is outstanding. The people are super friendly. And it's so close to the United States.
Mhm.
It's so close. It's an easy trip to do. And you're going to save a ton of money because your dollar's always better than our Canadian dollar. So it's
Well, in recent days, I didn't used to be that way, but yeah. Our guest again has been Margarita Ibbott. Margarita, where can people read more about your travels?
you can read me at downshiftingpro.com.
And why downshifting?
Because, as I said before, I was originally a lifestyle blogger, and in my other life, I was a professional organizer.
Uh-huh.
And downshifting means to voluntarily simplify your life.
Sure.
And it actually works now still. It's my brand. I've worked on it for almost 10 years, so I didn't want to change it. And downshifting, it means it's less stuff so I can travel more. Right?
Excellent.
It's all about traveling more now for me. And that's what it is. It means to really bring simplicity to your life, to do the things you really want to do. And you know what? I'm a pro organizer, pro blogger. This is what I do. This is my calling, and I love it.
And we mentioned one of your posts that we're going to link to, which is all the things you can do on the pass in Montreal. Is there a best post that we should point people to when they go to downshiftingpro.com that has to do with travel in Quebec?
Yeah, there will be. By the time that you air this, there is going to be one for sure. But there'll definitely be one that there's lots of posts, individual posts you're going to find. If you plug in Quebec City or you plug in Montreal, you're going to find a bunch of different posts that I've written up.
But for that super post, just send me a link and we'll put that in the show notes so that people can find that. Excellent. Well, Margarita, always a pleasure to talk to you. So glad to have you on The Amateur Traveler. Thank you for coming and sharing with us your love for Quebec.
Well, you know what? It's a great place to go. It's a great place to go, and it's really close. So, au revoir.
I heard from Tom this week, who was kind enough to send birthday greetings before he headed off to Togo to work at a mission hospital there, who said, "I love the show. It feeds my wanderlust. I look forward to each new show when it arrives. I have used your show when I go places you talked about. Many of your guests have great articles about the location and others. I tried to go to Cambodia last year with you, but my work schedule didn't work out. There is always Peru." And I did want to underline what Tom is saying. Usually in the show notes, which are both found in the lyrics of the episode as well as on the website, we do link back to articles from the guest that we have on quite often when the guest is somebody who has their own blog, for instance. So you might want to check that out. Also, just check out on an episode like this the lyrics, because it may be difficult to understand some of the French words, because the French and the French Canadians have a habit of not pronouncing all the letters in words. And so it is sometimes more difficult to pick up what the word is they're talking about. Check out the show notes if you have any questions about what we said in this episode. In terms of Peru, we're actually getting a final quote for the trip to Peru, which is scheduled for May of 2019. And then I'm hoping to put up this weekend the quote for the trip to Central Europe, which is 2018. And again, I'll be announcing that first in the Amateur Traveler Trips group, amateurtraveler.com/trips, which is a private Facebook group. And then I'll be announcing it on the newsletter 2 to 3 days later. And then the next episode we do of the show, which may not be next week because I think we'll probably take off a week for Christmas. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.